I'm not gonna think it through too much. I'm just going to enjoy the physicality of putting the lines down and dripping the paint. And I'll blob the paint up and then I'll see what happens. So, but I've reached a thought pattern that what I'm going to do somewhat is delicious. Look at my paints. That's really good. That's just what I want. Okay, get the camera going here, Jake.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, that's good, because I think this was not what I expected to find, but it's better than a brush. Oh, that's good too. Oh, that's unplanned. There's nothing more beautiful than black and white, really. Maybe this will be done. I'm Jacqueline Barnett. I'm actually 83 years old. I've been painting for quite a while. We live in Seattle, and my interest is in art, and also I'm quite interested in how people engage with art. It's not just to present myself, but to create a dialogue with the viewer.
How would you describe your art overall? What are some elements that you think are present in almost all of your art?
I feel like it's sensual, it's emotional, it's tactile. It is responsive to how one looks and feels, not so much to how one analyzes or thinks. And sometimes something can seem fairly formal and traditional, but I'm still working on how you respond to just the straight line or a dot or a horizontal. So it's based on how information just comes to one emotionally. It's always hard to figure out when you started. When I was young, and after my mother died, we had some friends who would come to the house, and one time they took me to an artist's studio because I'd mentioned painting. And he set me out with an easel and a canvas to paint outdoors, and I had read Van Gogh's Lust for Life, or the book Lust for Life, and so I painted everything I remember the tree trunks were all orange and bright, and it was very much in Van Gogh's style. And the teacher, instead of saying, no, you've got to make it look like it does, he said, that's great. You've really got spark. So just that little encouragement. And that was maybe 16. I didn't do anything at Vassar except history of art. And then after we moved to Washington, D.C., and I got married, I actually started a course to learn a little bit about painting with actually now a very famous artist called Ken Nolan and Tom Downing. And I was good there too. I mean, I wasn't without imagination as an artist, and that's what carries me through. Or not maybe imagination without energy. And the walls, this is wood, and then a couple of nails, so I can put different pictures. It's also a great treat to be able to, they're fairly large pictures, to be able to get away from them and see how they look at a distance.
So the first type of art that you really enjoyed was painting?
Yes. Yes. I think, maybe like in school you do a little bit of clay work, but it was definitely painting. It wasn't the domestic arts. I wasn't doing sewing or weaving or anything like that.
Yeah. When is there any moment when you realized I really want to do this as a career, or I really want to do this seriously? It's kind of gradual.
You tend to gravitate to a career or a hobby or a vocation that you um, that, that maybe you seem to do well at, and so it felt, from what I had studied and learned from the wide open door in modern art, that there was a time where an artist could just take the brush and really, without a lot of formal training, and just put something on the canvas which was meaningful to the artist and could become meaningful to a viewer. And there weren't many things that were so immediate as that. I think it's pretty a pretty comparing it in my mind to being a writer or a poet, which I feel is more, in a way, labor intensive. The painting seemed to be very, get an idea, lay it out there, and then work into it. But it was very free. I entered into the arena after the abstract expressionists, after the 50s, where there was a lot of validation for self-made. The qualities that were admired were daring, courage, use of color, expressionism. Well, prior to that, it was technique and rendition, which are more skills that I think are more developed with more diligent, practice. Then this is a project I have always loved. There are a number of these three-sided screens, but I do like them quite a bit. Again, on a canvas, you're dealing on a perfectly flat surface. Here it has a little bit of bend in it, so that gives a more alive. Some of the imagery on this is figurative in the sense of female, or maybe a clown male, which as a non-representational artist, but an artist who knows the figure has such potency, I always refer back to it. If you look over here in my entryway, you'll see two larger figurative works, fairly recent. This one with the broad shoulders, I'm now calling that a self-portrait.
When did you paint that one?
Maybe 2 months ago, a month ago. And this was something about hands, two people, maybe my husband and I, trying to support each other, and that was done maybe a year ago. Abstract expressionism was started by Pollock in the 50s, I think, or that label. And I think that the more critical word, again, was expressionism, that it was that somehow through a non-representational image, people could find a real emotional response. Someone like Pollock, what happened was that because of his painting on the floor and his dripping the painting and the energy and physicality of the man, the painting had a lot of energy. So abstract expressionism sort of became like a transference from an emotion into some gestures on the canvas. And ordinarily, abstraction was more cerebral. You decided, you looked at a still life, and then you would figure out what was going to be a horizontal and a vertical and a diagonal, and you could make it into an abstraction that way.
So do you identify as an abstract expressionist?
Yes. Yes, I was thinking that it's expressionist is a kind of a key word. It's to try and go from a sense of an idea or a feeling or a self and create a form that holds those feelings and maybe even teaches you something about those feelings. And because that means that I'm going into the inner part of my thinking and feeling, that would make it in a way abstract. I'm not making a representation um, uh, as much. And I think if I did representational work, uh, I think you would feel very close to the still life that you were doing, and you would sort of endow the apple or the banana or something with a sense of its own energy. But I found it easier and um, more informative or more giving of what I was interested in the viewer seeing if I used abstract forms. It might be hard for you to see a banana and not just think about it as a banana. But if you see different shapes, vertical and horizontals, then your own imagination as a viewer might relate it to other things. These are the racks with the paintings. And here you see kind of, oh, maybe two sides of my work. These are all monotypes that I haven't quite framed, but I've put on mat board. Some of them they're just all nice. They're all different. Let me see if I can get a nice colorful one for you. Oh, they're all beautiful.
How many paintings do you think you have here?
Oh, I don't know. Wow. I don't know. I don't think I've ever thrown out a painting, which I'm sure a lot of artists throw their stuff out. But to me, there's always a history in the struggle that then you just re-attend to. Rain on pavement. I did this one when I was walking in the rain, always coming down here to the studio. I think it's a pretty painting. So I think I have a lot. The school that I entered into at Stanford as a sort of student and stuff, the teacher that particularly I worked with was really an abstract expressionist, but really abstract. So to have a painting have a kind of cohesive meaning was not what he was interested in. It was more the surface, the color, the interaction of the patterning. And I started there because that's very freeing, and then gradually, as a communicator, I found that maybe having something that was slightly recognizable or that created a moment of sensuality or longing or memory in the viewer was a nice dialogue. And so I veered away from the Mondrian type of abstraction, the more mathematical abstraction, into the more emotional.
What materials do you like to use?
I use mainly stretched canvases that I'm not even stretching myself that you can buy. And I showed you the screens. I had fun painting. It's a little hard to see, but with a friend painting on these beautiful plates, which I think is a lovely medium, actually. You just paint on it with paints, and then you fire it in a kiln. And what's exciting for me when I did that as a ceramicist, the color you paint, the color it becomes is not the color you paint. Ceramic paint is basically no color.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll say on the jar black or thing, but when I'm putting it on, I don't really know. I did the same thing here on glass. All of these I love. I had a friend who is a glass artist, and he let me use his studio. But mainly I paint oil on canvas. And I like to do small ones too. I think small are really great. I decided I was going to be a little bit more focused, a little bit not painting just as gesturally, and I would take a small canvas and decide that no matter how I did it, that there would be a dot or something in the center, which worked off the squareness of the, you notice they're square, so the canvas is square, but the center dot is the most significant thing, more or less. But that was fun to do, so that I could, here's one with spirals. This is what they just allowed for. I like this one. That's fun.
Yeah, this is a cool collection.
It's a cool collection. This little one is sweet with the flower. You get it's I didn't do many eyes, but I like that one. Obviously, the eye is really a center pupil. These I just had a hang here. Those don't have the center. Look at this beautiful one, Jake. Isn't that beautiful? So that's just to me interesting, that I can feel that's really beautiful. And so it's small and it's not all over the place, yet it seems to me to really create a quality of life in and of itself, which sort of glows out back at you, which is a nice thing for a painting to do.
What do you think the value of abstract art is as a whole compared to
Representational. I suppose that I think representational is really wonderful, but it's a little bit more definable, a little bit more skill, judgeable. Abstract is a little bit more challenging, a little bit more taking you to a place that maybe you haven't really thought about before, or seeing something. It also allows for more daydreaming. A representational piece uses a lot of the energy of the viewer in seeing the scene, but the abstract is more daydreaming, I think. I think that's good, and it's particularly in our society now, which can be so inundated with visual things which are sort of defined by a very clear definition.
I know a lot of people that see abstract art and just say, I don't get it. What is it?
Well, I really understand people that say that, I don't get it, because they have to first place, they're insecure, which is not that they're insecure people, but they're looking at something that they've never seen before, and they feel a little bit intimidated. So I kind of like to sort of go into say, well, how does that yellow make you feel? Or how does that yellow make you feel with that black line going through it? And then they might say, well, that reminds me of a crash that I had, or that beautiful red reminds me of the sunset or something, or I like that part there because it's calm. So once you get them able to sort of imagine their relationship to some mark and not be thinking that they have to be an art critic, but just how they respond. People actually have a lot of feelings. You think yourself, a lot of feelings about color. I mean, that's in fact how we get a lot of our own emotional, information. I both fortunately and unfortunately paint fairly quickly. It's fairly spontaneous. so I can do a painting in 2 days, a big, a pretty big painting. Then I'll maybe go back to it, but it's pretty fast. This painting you can't see here. It's not like it's such a good painting, it's just a different painting. Sometimes I've gotten away from this intensity of the brush stroke, but this is a good example of an oil painting, densely painted and scraped through, and it just sort of, I would think to anybody it would seem like walking in a forest and finding not the beauty of the trees, but just a big bramble, messy area that you have to get through. But there's a little light in the background. It's not a painting that says you can't get through it. It's just a barrier. Now you're getting to the larger paintings over here. The rack, which my husband designed, has these wonderful poles, and you can lower and raise the shelves. So here's where the larger paintings go. Painting like this. Just pick it up and put it back in here.
When you were starting out painting, what were some obstacles that you overcame, or were there any people that said you shouldn't do this?
No, I had people were pretty, I didn't have a lot of, I only had my own negativity, that my own sense that I didn't have the technical skills. That was the main. There were not, people, because in this contemporary world, and women artists were, I mean, the 50s, 60s, there was a lot of support of women artists, just a lot of support. You could almost just put on that work shirt, and you were like another Elaine de Kooning, or important woman artist. So most of it, except for my own self-doubt, was pretty positive. Also, people don't come around really very often and say, "Oh, that's not for you. Don't do that, Jackie." That would be pretty cruel. Feminism helped, whether or not a woman has some way of looking at the world. That was an interesting art question, whether or not a woman sees things differently than a man. And you can, from a political point of view, you can want to say yes, or you can want to say no. Because you want to say yes because you feel a distinctiveness in being a woman. You want to say no because politically you want to keep saying there's no difference between men and women. So I sort of go with the first, to take the strength of a woman's intuitive physicality as a difference, but also as a positive. Again, at the end of the day, I think you all know from your children painting or yourself doodling or something that sometimes you do the very best work when you're not so aware of it being important. Mm-hmm. And it has a little bit more just expressionistic. I think mark making, I mean, you go way back. It's a very interesting sociological question, but mark making in art feels to me is really a part of expression, and that human beings like ways to go from inner feelings to share or to communicate. The interesting thing about art is that the vacuousness is, in fact, a pretty strong visual. I'm looking for a clip. A pretty strong visual expression.
Yeah.
So that makes me, Jay, pretty easy on myself. When something comes out unexpected, I can turn with it and either appreciate it or go forward with it. It's the people who come to my studio that know what they want to get, and then they can't get it. They get so frustrated and angry. But I feel like it's more like discovering something as you go along, because I don't really know where I want to go. So I think it makes sense for art to do that, actually.
What's going on in your mind when you start a piece?
So I'm thinking, again, I'm thinking about space. How do I do that? And then the canvas will actually start controlling it. There are all sorts of things you might think about. I might say I want to this time do a canvas where I use colors that are almost in the same tonality, that not be so free to add strong contrast. So that would be a different problem. And then the fun of it is that you are solving the problem in some way which makes visual sense to you. And then you sometimes back away and say, well, this might make sense to me, but you see it also with a viewer's eye. Does it actually hold together as a painting? So it's very creative without the deterrent of having to make immediate sense. You have quite a range of time, and I'll do things which I'm not necessarily proud or unproud of, but I'll turn the canvas sometimes around, because it's quite different when the shapes are reversed, and you get a different hit on what it could mean.
What do you like about the center painting?
I like its energy and its release of energy, I think. I like that I'm spun in it, but I'm not trapped. And I think the black and the drips had a sense of spontaneity, but the potency of the circle on a square is really a potent set of images. You have to be, I think you have to be careful that you don't get trapped. And so, see all these blue lines going this way? They, out of basically the blue center, they expand you, and then the circle coming in different layers of circles sort of visually pulls you in. So what I'm thinking I'm doing, but I'm doing it very spontaneously. What I'm thinking I'm doing is manipulating the way a normal person just uses visual information to sort of get a sense of where they are in a directional guidance. And since it's abstract, I jump over the representational sense, and I go into whatever you call it, a meta, whatever you want, where the structure of the imagery allows for a emotional response. And it's very apparent that a circle has a different feeling than a horizontal. I think you respond more. You're more relaxed with a horizontal, and you're more feel trapped with a circle. So I was fighting against that, yet a circle's so powerful. What was your question exactly? Can't remember.
Whether there was any one moment when you were like, man, I gotta do this, like I love this.
No, I don't think because I don't think my life stretch was like that. Because after getting married so young, at 22, that's young.
Yeah.
Then I had 5 children. So that takes that takes a lot of your physicality and raising them. But there was some parallels between watching a child grow and a belief in your own painting. I mean, there was some risk that you take and some joy in the unexpected.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make much sense actually, but I think they're somewhat. I think for me they weren't contrary in the qualities of person that were used in doing either.
How did your kids influence your art, either in actual art or in just your ability to do it as much as you would like, or?
It was really that to me. It was an extension of the physicality of the physical pure pleasure of having the children, of having them physically, of birthing them, of tending them, of loving them, of touching them. So it really they were. It feels as if I was able to go into a sensual world, creating and nurturing things that I love. So I actually like making a beautiful painting. I actually like that. I don't resent it. And with the problems that it has, I confront and almost enjoy. And so that's sort of the way it is with children. It's not as if it's all easy, but you always the differences, and you kind of learn back from them. It felt in my very fortunate um, position in life that they were both somewhat the same kind of responsive, giving, nurturing. Nurturing is a really nice thing to have, you know. I mean, coaches like that, it's not just a feminine thing. Making things better for other people is a real human grace. And so the painting was a bit that. I wonder, and I don't know, not needing to make money from painting, what freedoms that gave me, what self-doubt that gave me, what advantage and what disadvantage. Because that's not that is not something that is available to most people. And it was available to me that I can rent a beautiful studio and buy the paints that I want. So the only negative thing about that is that any sensitive person has to overcome a sense that they're there because of their advantages rather than their self. So artists talk about how much great freedom there is, but the freedom comes at a cost, that there's no rules. So therefore you never know if you're right or wrong.
What did you paint first in this one? How did you start the painting?
I'm quite sure from the way the paint is laid on that I somehow liked this sort of very flowy blue, and so that I put all this blue and even this green stuff around it, and then it was just too maybe a little too pretty, maybe a little bit too easy, and so then I put a contrary force fields, which is, if you want to call it good, it gives the painting a lot of energy. If you want to call it not good, it becomes confusing and overdeveloped. I call it good.
What do you mean good?
Well, I call it successful. I think I just think it's successful. I think there's enough break in these pink lines, though they go around physically. They are not visually tight. You as a drawer know that you could make that if they weren't broken here and here and here, and then not only did I break them there, then I put these black things, and then not only did that break it up with a little bit of staccato rhythm, then I threw in the white, and this is foil paint. This is a this is a kind of an acrylic paint that has a more physicality. So I think there's a lot of physicality in this painting, which I like too, a lot. What I might not like about it, it's not subtle. It's not like it's easy to understand, but it's pretty. It's pretty a loud trumpet sound.
Yeah.
It's not a soft, developed kind of melodic kind of response, and so I tend not to be able to paint those soft melodic type of renditions of feeling, but I admire them. I don't like all of them.
Yeah.
Well, no, some are too dark, and some didn't. You know, I don't like all of them, but it's hard. It's hard because you kind of remember where you were when you tried that painting. It's hard not to be forgiving. And I guess sometimes you choose an attitude towards life which is self-reinforcing, is positive. And if I chose an attitude towards life to be extremely critical of my work and value it, you know, on standards which are perfectly respectable, but they would be critical. This one wouldn't have been as good as that artist, and this one would have been imitative, and this one would have been. After a while, I wouldn't want to come here. It would be, you know, I don't think it would help the art so much. So why not see that as, oh, that was an attempt of something I did in the 60s, and look, all that darkness, out of that darkness was coming some light, and then look how it changed. It's maybe just a philosophy of self-preservation, to like what you do. And it doesn't have very much glamour to me, or pride to just trash everything that you've done or tried to make in your life because it hasn't achieved the respect that you wanted to have, or worldly respect, because we'd all be really in quite despair, I think. You just want to keep trying, and just, you know, you certainly don't want to be stuck up about your work, but you just want to sort of honor it for where you were. You did, you know, the little thing you tell kids, do your best. So I don't really, because of the way I paint, I don't really have any complete idea, but I'm making the mark now. Now, really, paintings take a long time, so you don't expect this one to be done during the filming. I just want you to see. You start putting in that shape, even in white, it kind of reflects a sense of a tree or something growing up, which is gives you a point of departure. And if I repeat this, so maybe you can just sort of see the beginning, the slight beginning.
How do you usually feel when you're in the moment painting? Does it depend on the
I usually feel quite inner directed. The only time I feel doubtful is after I've laid it all out and been sort of involved in it, and then I come back the next day and I know that there are things wrong, and I know that changing one part of it will change the relationship of almost all the parts, and I know that then I can't get back to that original. But I would say that the painting part of it is pretty non-troublesome. I'm not second guessing myself. I mean, the word ecstatic is too overboard and kind of a word I think is too hip. But it's sort of really it's like giving license to act out your own emotions and feelings in a medium or in a situation where it only can bring something good. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's not wasteful. It's also basically you've made it even affirmative value that painting for you is something that is your career. So you can see those are pretty good things. It's unlike athletics. It does take a lot of hard training. It's not like you're trying to lift something and run and push and push and push yourself for the end. But it's pretty much allowing your emotional response to things come out of your brain and your body into your gesture and your hand, which has this big jars of paint that they can just, relive the experience. I'll show you. We'll see what happens when and if what kind of shape would go with this that would be interesting. Well, let's do. And I changed that goopy shape into a crescent shape, just seeing, just reflecting with some of the ambience and beauty of any moon shape that you can do. And then I might want to take a reverse color. Blue is pretty dramatic because it's the contrary. But I'm going to go up like that, and then I'm going to go down like this, and then I'm going to fill this in. Oh, this is actually really fun. Come in like that. Slightly pull that in there, like that.
So how do you decide when a painting's done?
That's hard. That's hard. And that's one of my weak points because sometimes I overpaint things. I keep on going and stuff like that. So I have learned somehow if I come in and it just looks good, looks fresh and warm and inviting and interesting. Maybe that's enough. That there's I can't really take it any farther. Sometimes they're very practical things that you see that you know that if you fill in the blue line against the red space, and maybe the painting looks more finished than if you've just put a blue line and then the red and there's white between them. So there are often things which clean up a painting but don't change it too much. I'm not too good at that, but when I do it, I notice it makes a difference. That there are too many loose ends in my paintings sometimes, so it's nice to allow the emotional gesture to be the focus and not the fact that it's been done so spontaneously. People look at paintings and actually like to see the considered hard work, I think, of the artist. They like to know that the artist has actually thought about how the things go together. They don't want just your, slapping the paint on saying that's it.
Yeah.
Then there ought to be something over here that would also weight this down, just because I don't think I want it crimson. I'll try a raw umber, which will be very dark. We'll see. But I think it'll be a worthy shape. It's going to go up like that, and then it's going to also come over like this. It'll be slightly this. And then in this painting, we have this shape dealing with this shape. So then I think this shape is more powerful. He's going to come over around like this and actually control that one. I think I'm proud that I'm free enough to put it out there, that I both expose myself and am spirited and energetic. That it shows energy, spirit, some intellect, some sensual pleasure in color and in touch and in feel. So those are things, it's not a cold, not that it's bad. It's not a cold, sterile art that sort of wants to keep you away. It's kind of like a warm, and I think it's because it has a lot of nature relationship. I think it's earth affirming, life affirming. It's not about death and negativity, which would be perfectly reasonable to paint about, actually, but it would be so dark. If you painted.
What?
If you don't think about death and negativity, then your positivity can become trite too. You can't just be a Pollyanna and see the good and the prettiness of stuff, because nature is very, very cruel. But that doesn't mean that I think in your studio you have to only represent that aspect of it. You just have to know that it's there when you're painting the positive. Instead of hiding away from the grief or something, you try and explore the grief. And if you explore any emotion, well, I'm not sure of this, when I explore most emotions, I tend to reframe them in a more positive way. I don't seem to reframe them in a negative way, because a negative way is sort of darkness and closure, I think. Then I would want to make this white stronger so that it's more freeing. So nothing is really captured here. There's more white in there. It's large. It'll come all the way out to here. And I think it'll actually break the frame. And maybe over here.
How does your art reflect you as a person?
Oh, I come into my studio and it feels energetic, it feels positive, it feels earthy, it feels somewhat optimistic, it feels like it wants to be liked and appreciated. It doesn't feel pompous. It's not particularly intellectual. It feels like a friendly handshake or something. It feels a little physical. I feel like I'm a person that likes people. It's hard to say you like people in a physical way, but I'm not necessarily an introvert. I'm more of an extrovert. I'm more interested in you than really just staying within myself. So it's kind of an open art. So I think that represents me, and it tends to be positive. But I do that. I think you could paint things, maybe if you really let yourself go, that were about death and destruction and all your inner demons or inner fears. But I've never seen any real significance for me to do that. It would just be a reflection of what, in a way, is part of life's need not to over uh, engage in negative thinking.
What would you say to a young artist looking for wisdom?
Oh, I would just say, the big smile, just go for it, enjoy it, share. You'll meet wonderful friends. You'll always be challenged. Uh, uh, Make it a communication, make it a giving and a sharing. Uh, Try not to be too sensitive. Try to take criticism with a lilt and a smile and a gratitude and a respect, and and then use that whole energy, in everything that you do. It's not, people who set a beautiful table or put flowers on the table or people who cook. There are a lot of ways. There are just a lot of ways that the whole sense of making your environment responsive to beauty and to kindness is available for all of us. It's fun. It's fascinating. It's interesting.